when we went back to Grandma Browning's, Grandpa Browning was already gone. He raised the big Percheron horses, and he was currying one in the barn, and it pinned him against a stall and broke his ribs. And pneumonia set in, and that's what killed him. Well, that horse was worth right around $600 at that time. That was a lot of money. But my grandma was afraid of it, so she sold it for $50. Grandpa's brother lived with them. All their married life, he lived with them. He was a deaf mute. And but he could work a team of horses and plow, and they understood every noise he made. Well, I thought that was pretty interesting. I never knew him. I was too little when all this happened. I didn't know my grandma and grandpa Swartzwelder. I don't remember them at all. I do remember one time when we was back there, going through some woods and got across a bridge at a creek to a little cabin back in the woods, and there was two old maids who lived back there, and their names were Liney and Susie, and they always had cookies and stuff for the kids when we came back. I can remember my dad talking about my grandpa Swartzwelder. He said when he married my mother, he laid his arm across her mother's shoulders, just in a kind of a hug when they were ready to leave. But Grandpa didn't like that at all. He said he never did it again because Grandpa was a stern German, big handlebar mustache, and didn't put up with any nonsense.
Did your dad ever tell you stories about his childhood?
Oh yes, my dad told us lots of stories about when he was young. There was Uncle Albert, Uncle Ern, Uncle Ford, and Dad, 4 boys and 2 girls. It was Aunt Mattie and Aunt Holly. But I remember my dad telling about the time when he was courting my mother. And there was another boy courting her too. So Dad and his brother thought they would see what they could do about him, I guess. And they knew he had been to her house. So, and it was in the evening. And Dad, he said he was sort of a sissy type. And he had to go walk through these woods to get home. So Dad and Uncle Ern went down there, and Uncle Ern had a sheet that he put all over his head. And they stayed by the side of the road. Dad had made a little whirligig that you whirled it like this, and it went woo, woo. So when this boy started, I can't remember his name, it was funny. But when he started through the woods, Dad did that, whoo, whoo. And he said that guy looked all around, stopped and listened, and then he started again, and he started whistling. And Dad did it again, and he said, whoo, and that guy said, whoo, and he started running down the road, and just as he got close to Uncle Ern had that sheet on, and he got down and rolled out in the middle of the road, and that guy just leaped over him and kept going. Dad said, I never seen anyone run so fast. Then he told us about a buddy of theirs still lived at home. He wasn't married. They had chickens. So one night, when everybody was in bed, Dad and his brother went down there and they tied a dead owl up in the tree right above the hen house. And the next morning, Dad said they were on their way to church, and boy, they could hear somebody just shooting down, shooting that owl. And Dad said they knew who it was, of course, you know. But this is kind of tricks they played on each other. And after that bit with the boy that was courting my mother at church that next morning, he said, "I know you're the one that did that, Fred." He said, "I won't forget that." I guess that's all they had to do, was just be ornery, living out like that, you know. There wasn't a lot going on, so if you didn't make up your own stuff, you would get pretty bored.
Did he ever tell you much about his siblings when they were children? About he and his brothers and sisters when they were kids?
This is about all he told.
Okay. And what about courting? Did he tell you much about courting your mom?
No, that was about it. Oh, he did tell us one thing. They had a problem with mice getting in the grain out in the barn. So two of them had to go at night and keep watch. And one of the other brothers, he did the same thing as Uncle Ern had done that one night. He took a sheet and put over his head, and he walked down the road and he was flapping his arms, you know. And Dad looked out that crack in the barn and he said, "Ern, do you see that?" Because the moon was shining real bright. Well, Uncle Ern looked, well, it was Uncle Albert that was doing it, and what he was supposed to do was just scare them, then turn around, run and get back home, but they was so scared. They took off down the road and beat him home. Dad said, we was barefooted on that dirt road. He said, I could just hear my feet saying, "You let me go first and then I'll let you go next." He said, they're just going pity-patty, pity-patty. And when they busted through the door, Grandpa was sitting there, and Dad said, "My gosh, there's a ghost out there. We're not staying in that barn." And said Grandpa was just giggling, and then Uncle Albert came in with the sheet. So they had to go back to the barn. But these are the kind of things they were up to.
Mm-hmm. What was school like for you?
For me, I liked school all right. Most of my teachers I really, really liked. We had a gym teacher that I was terrified of her. She just scared me to death. She was built like a man. She was big and muscular. She had her hair cut real short like a man's, and when she'd walk down checking us on our gym suits and stuff, you know, oh, I would just quiver because I was afraid of her. I never knew, you know, I mean, she had us climbing ropes in gym class, and boy, she'd stand right there at the bottom of that rope and say, "Don't you dare let go, you just keep going till you get to the top." Boy, that was enough incentive, you know, to make you climb that rope. And they also had a swimming pool. And my sister Betty and I, we were fine in there as long as we were in that shallow part. But then we used those boards to help us in deep part for a while, and then she said, no more boards today. You get in the deep part without them. And Betty said, me and Margaret we're afraid. And she said, well, you either get in or I'll put you both in. So Betty just said, come on. She took my hand. Out that door we went home. Told my dad what was happening. So he went back up with us and he said they were to be taken out of that class. So we didn't have to go in there with her anymore. But I had a good childhood.
Did you have some close friends when you were a girl?
Yes, I had one really good friend. Her name was Mary Brailer, Aggie, we called her. And we were together as much as we could possibly be. I can remember we went to her house. She said, stop, because we got a telephone. And oh boy, that was really something. So we figured out what we could do on that telephone if her mom wasn't around to catch us. And we would call the drugstore and we'd say, do you have Prince Albert in the can? And he always said yes. And we said, well, why don't you let him out? Then we'd hang up. If her mom would have caught us, we would have been in big trouble.
What is Prince Albert in the can?
Oh, it's tobacco, pipe tobacco.
When did you meet your friend? Were you little?
Yes. We went to school. We were in the same classes together.
Did you know her all the way through school?
Through the lower grades, yes. Then high school, I went to work. I worked for a couple. He was Italian. She was Irish. She was deaf. And he had a jewelry store in the basement, and they had 2 little boys. So I lived with them and went to high school there and took care of those kids. And then when I left there, I was still in high school. I worked a couple years there. Then I went and lived with another couple. She was a nurse and he was a detective. And they had 2 little boys. So I kept the boys and went to night high school. And then I quit school. I went part of my 12th year and then quit and got married. But it really wouldn't have mattered. High school diploma, you still had no skill. And back then, very few girls went to college. It just wasn't done. Mm-hmm. Girls didn't drive, they didn't go to college. So
when did you get your driver's license?
When I was 30 years old. And the only reason I got those was because when Bob worked awful long hours, when he came home in the evening, I hated to ask him to go back out to do shopping for groceries or clothes or whatever we needed. So he taught me to drive. And I got my license, but I was always a cautious, leery driver, and I think it was because I was that old when I got my license. You don't have those fears when you're 16, 18, you know.
Did you date any boys when you were in high school?
Oh yeah. Yeah, but not a lot, not really. On my 16th birthday, I was going to night high school, and that's when I met Bob. And I remember he bought me a box of candy for my birthday. And we dated for 2 years, off and on.
What was he doing at the time? Was he?
He had
was,
just got out of the